All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another Foods for Health stream. Coach Nate here. January 2022, the 5th. Thank you so much. Hard to believe. Hard saying that, actually. Again, already into 2022. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about the ketogenic diet. I've been getting a ton of questions surrounding this, not only from clients, but also from members, also from individuals in the community who are watching the videos. A lot of questions on the keto diet, maybe getting started into the new year. So I thought we'd really focus on that diet. We can focus on really a number of different diets, but I think for today, let's focus on the keto diet. And of course, if you guys have any questions yourselves, more than happy to answer those questions, anything to do with really any diet. But we'll go over the ketogenic diet, what it is, how you can start off, what you can expect, and why it's really become, I'd say, probably one of the most popular diets out there right now. I really wouldn't call it a fad because it's come in many different forms. It's been reshaped, it's been sort of repackaged in a lot of different forms under a lot of different names. If you remember the early 2000s, you probably remember it very similar or very closely related to the Atkins diet. So it's not like the ketogenic diet has just come out of nowhere. This has been around for, to be honest, since the 1800s. The idea of eating low carbohydrates in your diet in order to lose weight. And I think that's one of the major reasons that we're going to see when we talk about it, why people are getting on a ketogenic diet. But like I said, thank you so much for joining me. January 5th already, 2022. Unbelievable. Time is just flying by. But I think a lot of people really want to get set and get going on this 2022. Like we said, and we've mentioned in the last month, kind of leading up to this point, we want to try to make 2022 the best year that we can and the healthiest year that we can. Does that involve, starting the ketogenic diet for some? It might, and for others, it might not. But that's why you guys are absolutely able to ask your questions. It doesn't matter if it's absolutely related to keto or not. I want to make it a free-flowing discussion. Toom, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you. Thank you for coming in here. Always great to see you in here. You did keto for 12 months. Good for you. You know what? It's interesting. I've been doing a little bit of keto. I'll probably do it for about 3 months, 3 to 6 months. Thumbs up added. Thank you so much, Toom. I appreciate it. And you know what? And that's what I'll usually have individuals do. Some people will kind of continue and keep going with keto, keep kind of pushing with it, keep the diet if they really, really like it, if they really enjoy it. Some people, it's hard for them, let's be honest, hard for them to go over 3 to 6 months. And we'll talk about why that is. Toom, you did 12 months. Congratulations on that. I'm wondering what results you saw from that 12 months. Because, like we said, there can be health benefits, all right? But one of the biggest benefits for a ketogenic diet, taking out carbohydrates, higher protein but high fat mainly, is for weight loss. It's interesting. Weight loss has become one of the biggest almost sellers of starting the keto diet, but it was actually really started as almost like a lot of the research was done as medical research looking at a ketogenic diet. A lot to do with epilepsy, things like that, a lot to do with heart disease, Alzheimer's disease even. So it's been interesting how we've kind of formed this keto diet where there was a lot of studies that were kind of tied into more medical research, and now it's sort of being associated with a lot of not only weight loss, but fat loss. And I think that's the big difference, guys, in what we're going to talk about. Keto is good for looking ripped. Your body loses a lot of water. You certainly have to make sure that you're drinking a lot of water. Sometimes you'll even see people recommending that you add a little bit of salt into your foods. Not a ton, but add a little bit of salt, just because of kidneys and things like that. So yeah, you definitely need to keep your water intake high. Like I said, I'm doing a little bit of keto right now. Again, it's not going to be long term. All right, it's just sort of about a 3-month process. But one of the major things that I'm drinking is a lot of water, a lot of tea. looking lean and slim face when on keto. Absolutely. Well, the one thing that we'll see, and before we really get into our keto topic here, guys, and how to start it and what foods we can eat, which ones we should stay away from. A lot of the times why you'll end up looking more lean and why a lot of people will actually show a slimmer looking face is because what you're taking out is carbohydrates. And a lot of the times you're absolutely having zero sugars in your diet. All right, so sugars, what we've talked about a little bit before, and I've brought this up on a couple of discussions. I don't do well with sugar. That's why I want to kind of play around with a keto diet right now and a little bit of intermittent fasting. And those are the two main diets that I've been researching as of late as well. So the one thing that you'll see all the time is, yes, you're going to be losing body fat. All right. The other thing is, as you're losing weight and as you're losing fat, all right, a lot of the times people will start to lose it in their face. And you'll notice, all right, individuals who've lost it in their who are losing fat might lose it in their face first. A lot of people are looking a lot slimmer. That's why you'll see sort of that slim face look. And it's interesting. You'll see a lot of before and afters. The reason why the slim face, basically, it can just be summed up and attributed to weight loss. Parkinson's. You know what? It's interesting. That's a good question, Mac. There's been some research into Parkinson's and everything like that. What it can help. I've heard more so in relation to epilepsy and things like that. Haven't read a ton on Parkinson's, to be honest with you. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the ones that they looked at. If it had beneficial effects or not, I'm not too sure. That's one that you might want to speak with your medical practitioner about. Sonia, good morning to you. Happy New Year. Thank you, Sonia, for joining. It's great to have you into chat this morning. Again, so early, 7 a.m. on a Wednesday. Thank you so much. I appreciate having you in there. Yes, anything that reduces inflammation is good for you. Absolutely. We want to be reducing inflammation. And that's one of the things with keto diet is, if we're having a lot of saturated fats, if we're taking out some antioxidants, that's one of the issues, right, a lot of people have with the diet. And we're going to talk about all of this, guys, right? Because a lot of the times people will recommend not having blueberries on a ketogenic diet, all right? Whereas I love blueberries. But again, I'll give you a little bit of tips, some pointers, some things that you can add in there for some high antioxidants, for antioxidant foods while on a keto diet. I myself just had raspberries last night. All right. So I think the main point that we want to start off with, if you're going to start a keto diet, if you haven't read anything into it or you've heard it, you've seen it on the news, maybe you have a friend that's experienced some good results with a keto diet, I think the first thing is, one, you're going to want to do a little bit of research yourself. So listening to something like this discussion, all right, knowing what a keto diet is, what foods are good for a keto diet, what foods aren't good for a keto diet. Another one is you could have a nutrition coach, all right, helping you out, helping you build a plan, all right, for a ketogenic diet, okay? Because it can be really easy. I'm telling you guys, working with my clients, it can be really easy for individuals to be good for a week, but then fall off very, very fast, all right? And it doesn't take a lot. It can be getting like one orange and a couple pieces of bread, and then they're back on the carb wagon and they're out of ketosis, all right? And like I said, all diets serve a purpose. One might work better for you. One might not work better than a couple others, like intermittent fasting, paleo, Mediterranean, vegan, whatever it is. Right? But if you're only giving yourself a couple of days, you're not getting those full benefits, obviously, of ketosis. And so you don't really know if keto is right for you. All right. So we want to try to stop, one, those cravings. All right. And then also, two, stopping you from crashing. All right, stopping you from getting off the diet, helping you to stay on a little bit longer. But yes, inflammation, 100%. And some would argue, again, we have to look at both sides here, and this is from someone who's doing a keto diet right now, right? Is a keto diet the best for reducing inflammation? Is it the best for your heart? Is it the best for blood pressure and things like that? A lot of the times, all right, before you start keto, one of the precautions that you might want to talk to your medical practitioner about is, are you taking medication for high blood pressure. Do you have high blood pressure? Another one is, looking at your insulin levels. So do you take medication for diabetes, things of that nature? So there's a lot of things that we got to look up to or look into before we start. I think that's what we want to look into so we can start correctly. Febby, thank you so much. Love your chat. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Great to have you in here, Febby. Kathleen, good morning. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you, Kathleen. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much, Febby. Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate it. And absolutely anything that's going to reduce inflammation. There's a lot of books and a lot of diets out there, the anti-inflammatory code or the anti-inflammatory book and things like that. Absolutely, inflammation. You'll hear in all of my videos, not only acute but chronic inflammation, something that we're going to want to be taking out. Remember, chronic inflammation can lead to chronic disease risk factors. So inflammation is one of the big things that we want to get rid of. So again, let's talk about keto. If anyone's on keto right now or thinking about keto, right, then go ahead, ask your questions in chat, all right, and then we can discuss them. But I'm just going to go through a step-by-step breakdown. We'll start, with what it is, what its purpose is, why people do it, and then we'll talk about some of the foods that people are on, what you want to avoid, what you want to take if you're on a keto diet. Exercise is very important. Yeah, exercise is definitely important, really, for anyone for a TOOM. You're exactly right. I think exercise is huge. That fitness, if you're getting the 150 minutes per week, I think that would be great. Remember, we always shoot for 150 minutes of aerobic exercise, mix in a little bit of anaerobic, so resistance training. I think that's great for anyone. So let's talk a little bit about, keto. Why do people get on keto? Well, we know, right? We have to think about keto as a carb-restricted diet. A lot of people, I'll talk a little bit about sometimes in other chats where I talk about how it's restrictive nature. A lot of people will also talk about its restrictive nature into the foods that they can eat. A lot of people will talk about how, I can't eat this, can't eat that. But what we want to think is, all right, it's restrictive in carbohydrates, not so much in calories. All right, because we want to keep fat high. Fat is probably going to be where most of your calories are coming from, replacing carbohydrates, and protein will probably be a little bit higher as well. All right, so think of it as a low carb, high fat diet. All right, that's why sometimes you'll see it as LCHF. All right, low carb, high fat. All right, so the first thing we want to think of, it's restrictive, but it's restrictive in the sense that we're restricting carbohydrates and not calories. Okay, a lot of people starting out don't even count calories, aren't even really worried about calories at all. That's me right now. All right, especially coming off the holidays. If you're eating a lot of sugar, a lot of carbohydrates, the calories don't matter. It's just sticking to the fat and to the carbs, into the protein. So I do. Yeah, and you'll definitely want to make sure you speak with your medical practitioner as well, Mac. Absolutely. With Parkinson's, very complex condition. Obviously, staying active is very, very important, like TOOM is saying. But please speak with your medical practitioner as well. If it's you or a family member that's dealing with it, with dopamine levels and all that stuff and reversing Parkinson's, absolutely make sure that you speak with your medical practitioner. All right, so again, it's restrictive, but it's restrictive of carbohydrates. Remember, the amount of carbohydrates that you want, and it usually looks at net carbohydrates. And, with TOOM, we've discussed this a little bit. Net carbohydrates are just the amount of carbohydrates that you consume. So let's say that you have 50 grams of carbohydrates, but you have 25 grams of fiber. Your net carbohydrates will be 25 grams. All right, so basically on a carbohydrate diet, what you're looking at is for a diet that has 50 grams or less of net carbohydrates. I think 50 grams is a little high, to be honest with you. I'm lower than 50 grams, and individuals who don't need as many calories as I do per day, they definitely don't need 50 grams of net carbohydrates. A lot of the times I'll see 20 to 40, all right, recommended. And I think that's a nice number, somewhere in between, all right, 20 on the low end, somewhere up around 40 on the higher end. All right, but yeah, 50 can be a little bit high, especially, depending on what your size is. Susan, good morning to you. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining again. Absolutely. I don't count calories. I'm with you there, Susan. I don't count as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with counting calories. All right, but on a keto diet, starting out, the important thing is you're sticking to your fat and to your protein. All right, it's not the total amount of calories you're taking in that we're really too concerned about at the beginning. It's making sure that you get into ketosis. It's making sure that you want to make sure that you are getting into ketosis, because that's the stage where you're using fat as energy. All right, so that's why a lot of people, the calories aren't the important thing. You don't want to give yourself extra work to do. You just want to make sure that you're staying within that protein and especially the fats, because that's what's going to get you into ketosis, not low calories or anything like that. You could be eating carbs and low calories, but you won't be into ketosis. 50 grams of carbs a day will keep you in ketosis if you are active. It'll keep some people in ketosis, but not everyone, Toom. A lot of the times, we can say that we should shoot for this or can shoot for that. All right. If you're active, it'll definitely help, because you're going to be burning off a lot of the sugars that are coming in. But for a lot of people, all right, around 50 grams of carbs might be just a little bit high. It doesn't actually get them into ketosis. Everyone's a little bit different. Sometimes it's going to vary. That's why they have the 20 grams to 50 grams a day. We see kind of two goalposts, but you're right. We don't want any more than 50 grams of carbs. All right. If you're active, all right, you got to get used to, working out sort of depleted a little bit. A lot of people will sort of carb load before their workout, won't they, too? They'll have those 50 grams of carbs, even more sometimes, before they have their workout. But if you're in a keto diet, you got to get used to working out fasted. You got to get used to working out without that kind of carbohydrate energy. All right, because remember, your body's not using glucose. All right, we'll start talking about this. Glucose as fuel, it'll be using fat as fuel. So we want to make sure those carbs stay low, but no more than 50. And again, it's net carbs per day. That's why I'm not a huge fan of the net carbs. I mean, that means you could be eating somewhere around 70 grams of carbs per day. And then if you have 20 grams of fiber, then you're still hitting your 50 grams of carbs. So just be careful with that. Make sure that you're staying a little bit on the lower end. All right, taking net carbs into consideration, but make sure you're not overdoing it on carbohydrates as well. Also, I'll say this. A lot of people will take a fiber supplement when they're doing a keto diet. I like your fiber coming from cruciferous vegetables. I am huge on a ton of greens, big salads, your broccoli, even cauliflower, things of that nature. All right, so your spinach, your kale, your mixed greens, so Swiss chard, broccoli, if I didn't mention that. That's where I really like your fiber coming from. All right, instead of mixing it in with, like, say, a Metamucil type drink, and then you're having your fiber that way. Get it from those micronutrients. Those are excellent fiber sources. The other nice thing, all right, is when we eat those cruciferous vegetables, the greens, a lot of the times we're having olive oil with it. That's an excellent mix into our salads, guys. A lot of health benefits, all right, from mixing those cruciferous vegetables, getting our fiber, and then olive oil, the healthy fats. Olive oil is going to be probably in your diet if you're on a keto diet. So what's the whole point? Like I said, right? Well known, obviously, all right, for being low carb. A lot of the times we think it's restrictive, but again, in the sense, it's restrictive in carbohydrates, because it's funny, you can have all the bacon you want. Sometimes you'll see people promote all the bacon, eggs, all the meat that you want, fatty meat. All right, the fatter the better. Actually, they just tell you to stay away from lean cuts, all right, because that's gonna increase insulin a little bit more. So things like fish, things like chicken, all right? If you're going to have chicken, leave the skin on so you're getting the extra fat, all right? Fat is your friend when you're on a keto diet, guys. Again, you don't want insulin to spike. You don't want to increase glucose levels. You want to keep those regulated, all right? So here's what happens when you eat carbohydrates, all right? So if you're on a keto diet and you're staying away from carbohydrates, once you have those carbohydrates, your body produces two things, guys. All right, and this is pretty much the crux of why we're talking about why a keto diet can be so beneficial for weight loss. Well, one, it's going to produce glucose. All right, and the reason why when we eat carbohydrates, glucose is produced is because it's very easily used as energy. All right, it's the body's preferred, sort of source for energy over anything else, because it's so easily converted to energy. So it'll be chosen over any other foods, any other energy source, not fat. All right, it'll be glucose, so your sugars. So let me just make sure I'm not missing anything in chat. But let's just make sure we get that point taken care of first. When we eat something that's high in carbohydrates, and again, don't just think of carbohydrates as like breads, pastas, think refined carbohydrates as well. So it could also be sugars. Again, your body's going to produce glucose. Once we produce glucose, boom, your body has a store of energy. All right, it's the easiest molecule for your body to convert to energy, guys. So that's why your body is always going to choose glucose every time. All right, we want the body choosing fat if we're on a keto diet. All right, so that's why we stay away from carbs. We don't want it choosing glucose, and it's going to choose glucose pretty much every time over fat. It's also going to produce insulin. So when we eat carbohydrates, guys, we have the production of glucose, and we also have the production of insulin. And insulin, they're both produced hand in hand, because insulin is produced to process glucose. All right, and it's processed so that in order that it can make it into the bloodstream. All right, which again takes it around into the body. All right, so that's the major crux, guys. All right, and I see your question there, big brother. Just give me one sec. But that's the crux of it, guys. Once we eat carbohydrates, the body produces glucose. We get that increase, like I always say, the increase in blood glucose levels, and then we also get the production of insulin. Your body's going to be using those carbohydrates or glucose as energy, all right? And we want our body using fat as energy. So that's why we stay away from the carbohydrates. Tammy, good morning to you. Hope you're doing well, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Hope you're having a good Wednesday morning. Okay, so I hope we got the glucose and the insulin production point from those carbohydrates. And again, your body is the easiest molecule for your body to use as energy. All right. Glucose is very simply used as energy. That's why your body's going to choose it every time as its main energy source, guys. What's the difference between all these diets? What's common amongst them? Interesting question. Well, it depends from diet to diet. If you're looking at a keto diet, there's a ton of difference compared to a lot of other, say like a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet. Good morning, big brother, and good morning to you as well. So what's the difference between all of these diets and what's common amongst them? Well, the differences are very easy to speak to. If you're on a keto diet, you're eating absolutely zero carbohydrates. You're eating a lot of fat. All right, so that's obviously the huge one. I think at this point into the chat, you guys understand that. We have no carbs, or at least less than net 50 grams of carbs. All right, and it's probably going to be somewhere in between 20 and 40. So that's the big difference. All right, you're going to be eating more saturated fats. All right, more oils like olive oil, things of that nature. You're going to be eating fattier meats, when a lot of the times on a lot of diets, we talk about eating lean meats like fish, chicken, things like that. On a keto diet, a lot of the times, a lot of people who are promoting it, all right, will tell you to keep it a little bit fatter. That way you're not increasing insulin or increasing glucose like we just mentioned. All right, because if you're doing that, if you're increasing your glucose, you're doing the exact opposite of what we want to achieve on a keto diet. If you increase glucose, all right, then that glucose is going to be used as energy and not fat. We want to get into ketosis where we're burning fat for energy. So that's the main difference with than any other diet. Paleo, a little bit similar. The thing that's in common, I think, the other difference is you're taking out a whole macronutrient, right, guys? Usually on most diets, you have your macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, protein, all right? Another way of saying it, we're taking out a whole macronutrient. Okay, so big difference with keto than other ones. All right, the thing that's common among them, micronutrients. Get your micronutrients in, guys. Doesn't matter what diet you're on, we need to make sure that we're getting proper micronutrients. All right, that's why I'm huge on cruciferous vegetables, salads, supplementation if we need it. With my keto diet right now, I'm supplementing with certain vitamins and minerals. A lot of it is coming from vegetables, though. I mean, one of the big ones that you'll see on a keto diet, some people will even be worried about B vitamins and vitamin C. But if you're eating meat and if you're eating, like, let's say broccoli, you don't have to worry about those two micronutrients. You're going to be getting a ton of B vitamins from your, let's say, ground beef, and then let's say from your broccoli, a ton of vitamin C. So if you're doing it right, that's why I'm saying start it correctly. That's why I put it into the title. If you're beginning, make sure you have your meals, all right, sort of figured out, planned out. Make sure you're eating healthy. Just don't overdo it. I know bacon is like it's almost cliche to say, bacon on a keto diet. Yes, you can do bacon. All right, absolutely. It can be in the diet. For me, it's not. It's just a personal choice. But the big thing on a keto diet, make sure you're having the salads, guys. Make sure you're having the vegetables. Get your micronutrients in. I think the big thing that's common within any diet is you need to make sure you're getting good micronutrients. All right, make sure you're getting probiotics, things of that nature. Depending on your goal, all right, a thing that's in common is, are you in a calorie surplus, deficit, or maintenance? All right, are you losing weight, staying the same weight, or gaining weight? That's going to be common on any diet, all right? The other one is, does it work for you? Is it something you're happy with? I think I would leave it at that, big brother. We can go on and on, but that seems to be the most important ones. I think micronutrients, making sure that you're getting micronutrients and you're not deficient in micronutrients, especially something like vitamin B12, iron, things of that nature. Tammy, I wish I could stick to keto. I just can't do it. I've tried. You're not the only one, Tammy. A lot of the people who I coach, I tell them, there's been a lot of success stories with people who I've been coaching getting on the right plan, and it's getting the right plan. Not to say that you were on the wrong plan or anything, Tammy, but like I've been saying, starting correctly, that's probably one of the hardest things. Getting on keto, finding a plan that works for you, and then that way you're able to stay on that plan. It's very, very tough. And trust me, the first couple of days are the toughest, I think. As your body starts to drain itself of sugar, as it starts to go a little bit lower and lower in glucose, as we start getting into ketosis, it's very tough. Big brother, thank you. Oh, my pleasure, big brother. I hope that helped answer your question a little bit. Appreciate you asking it. But you're exactly right, Tammy, and I'm sure if anyone else has tried starting out keto, I think, maintaining the diet, especially within those first couple of days, within the first couple of weeks, is probably the toughest part, because we need that plan that works for you. I think one major tip for you guys is, if you're starting keto, don't worry too much about the calories. You can always go to the calories, right? Make sure that you're just staying in the proteins and the fats, all right? Get that sorted out so that you're in ketosis, because once you're in ketosis, it is a little bit easier, because your ketosis is you're using fat as energy, and also the other benefit that comes from that is that you're not as hungry. All right. The thing with when you raise your glucose levels, I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. When you raise your glucose levels, not only are you at more risk of, you're using that as energy, but it getting stored as fat. All right. So a lot of the times, glucose can be stored as fat, especially if you're not burning it off. All right. Glucose, all right, especially simple carbohydrates, very quickly digested, can be stored as fat quite quickly. All right. Now, the other thing with glucose and what makes keto so popular is when you have, like, let's say you have a bagel in the morning. I hear all the time, and I hear from a lot of people, well, when I eat breakfast, I feel hungry in the day, like say at like 10. They'll have breakfast at 7 a.m. I'll be hungry before lunch, so I don't eat breakfast altogether. What I'll always tell them is, or ask them, is what are you having for breakfast? Is it a simple carbohydrate? Is it a complex carbohydrate? Is it a carbohydrate in general? All right, or is it protein and fat? The people who have had the most success are the people who will have something like an egg or a hard-boiled egg or eggs in general. Why? Because it's very satiating. All right, when we think of eggs, think of satiety. It's funny, we've been pronouncing words differently here on our live streams just because we hear the different pronunciations so often, like polyphenols or polyphenols, pecans, pecans. All right, it's the same thing in this case. But, if you're having that bagel, you're going to be crashing. All right, glucose is going to cause you to crash. All right, especially if you spike it, all right, with things like sugar, you're eventually going to get the crash. You're going to run out of glucose. Your body's going to get those alarm bells are going to be going off telling you need food. All right, and the good thing about keto is, all right, and one of the things that they will be marketed as keto is that you can be full for longer because you're burning body fat and fat as fuel. So think about that, guys. One last time, when you eat carbohydrates, the reason why we stay away from them, all right, we have no carbohydrates or very little carbohydrates, is because when we consume them, our body creates glucose and it creates insulin. And glucose is used as its main energy source, where we want fat as its main energy source. All right, so, since glucose is being used as the primary energy source, fats are not needed, and then therefore are most often stored. So that's why I was saying often stored as fat, guys. Okay, so a little bit of a difference there. We have an Italian restaurant. I remember you saying this, Tammy. That's awesome. Italian restaurant, and my husband makes homemade bread every day. Yes, at my meals and all the passes. It's just so hard. Absolutely, 100%. 100%, Tammy. I mean, trust me, I grew up around those foods as well. I'm a big pasta fan. I do not mind bread. I told you guys many times, like Ezekiel bread, even whole wheat bread, I've had in my diet from time to time. I have no gluten sensitivities or anything like that, no inflammation that's being created. I just use it as another carbohydrate source. Very, very tough. If that's part of your daily diet, keto, I think, maybe more so than a lot of the other diets, really takes a mindset shift. You have to shift the mindset. It's like, okay, today, or for me, I think it's like today or tomorrow. Try not to push it out like a week later or 2 weeks later, because then you'll just never get to it. But it has to be that mindset shift where it's, okay, I have to take this out of the diet, and I have to have these foods, and these foods. And that's where coaching really helps, all right? Because you have to supplement it with something. If you're happy having like pastas and breads, what can you supplement that with, Tammy, that's going to make you just as happy than having both? Maybe there's nothing. Maybe keto's just not right for you. Right, but eventually it would get easier for you. It's just staying away from it. One of the things you could also do is think of keto as being temporary. Go 3 to 6 months. All right, then seeing how it works for you then as well. That's the one thing I always like to tell people as well. Just because you start keto doesn't mean you have to stay on keto for the rest of your life. All right, you can use it for weight loss. You can use it for a number of different reasons. All right, weight loss is usually the most common if you're if you're using it temporary. So just because you're starting keto, guys, doesn't mean you have to stay on it for the rest of your life. I think it's very effective at weight loss. There's tons of studies out there that show its effectiveness at weight loss. If you want to take me for an example, all right, after the holidays, all right, 3-pound loss in 4 days. All right, again, that's not going to happen for everyone. All right, it's just probably because of holiday eating and things like that. But if you are on that keto diet and you're doing a pretty good job of not snacking throughout the day, I think that's another thing we'll talk about, not snacking throughout the day, then you're going to want to make sure, then you're probably going to see good results, to be honest. Train while fasted is good to deplete glycogen. Absolutely, too. That's a good point. All right. Yep, you definitely deplete glycogen. All right, so glycogen is being depleted. We're depleting the body of glucose. All right, the other thing, all right, and what we're seeing from research here as well, if you're on a keto diet, depending on the intensity, and this is going to be from person to person, all right, we're also seeing an increase in growth hormone. All right, decrease in insulin, increase in growth hormone, which is very, very nice. All right, and I think that's important to point out. So if you're working out while fasted, all right, yes, not only are you depleting glycogen levels, all right, glucose levels, but you're also seeing an increase in growth hormone. So two very important points there because both are hormonal, right? Insulin, almost thought of as like the fat hormone, all right, and growth hormone is like your anti-aging hormone, all right. You see a decrease in insulin, all right, because blood glucose production is going down, all right. You're decreasing that, but your growth hormone is going up, all right, which is amazing. That's why I'm trying to get and I think one of the hardest things to do is if you're starting a keto diet is to be starting a workout plan while on keto, because a lot of times, especially if you work out in the morning, you're going to be working out fasted, right? Or you might have something like, a lot of the times people have like that bulletproof coffee. If you don't know what that is, it's a tablespoon of full fat butter, so just butter, and then usually a teaspoon to a tablespoon of MCT oil, which is basically just coconut oil. You might have that before. That's something that I'm probably going to be doing. Yes, and all the carbs out of the house. Absolutely. That's it. You know what, Tammy? You make a really good point. A lot of times, if people are on keto, they just have to get rid of all the foods. It's of all the carbs. That's probably one of the easiest things for people to do to help them to stay on keto. 100%. Some people carb cycle. Yes, absolutely. Some people even carb cycle on keto, and we're going to talk about the different keto diets that there is. If you're on keto, all right, I'm a fan of carb cycling to a certain extent. There just needs to be a certain amount of time before you cycle those carbs. If we're cycling too often or too quickly, you're just never going to be in ketosis. You're never going to get the full benefits of keto. All right, and ketones, because ketones, all right, what we're seeing from ketones are produced by the liver, guys, when we're in ketosis. We're seeing that it can be very helpful for brain health, all right, very healthy for the body. So exactly. So that's why we'll talk about carb cycling, the different types. But again, some people will carb cycle. I'll have some clients come in and tell me that they'll eat carbs 2 days of the week and then be on keto for the other 5 days. It takes 3 to 4 days usually on average to get into ketosis. If you're cycling carbs 2 times a week, sadly, unfortunately for these individuals, and I have to tell them, they're never in ketosis. They're just not giving their bodies enough chance to get rid of the glucose, get rid of the sugar from the body so that they can start getting into ketosis and start using fat as energy. High blood pressure, diabetes. Okay, Matt. Now, I will say this. Thank you for pointing that out. I will say this. So high blood pressure, diabetes. Those were the two main things. It's interesting you said that, all right, because on some precautions before starting a keto diet, all right, you would want to speak with your medical practitioner, because two groups, individuals with higher blood pressure and individuals who are either pre-diabetic, type 2, type 1, whatever it is, all right, if you're taking medication for high blood pressure or medication for diabetes, such as insulin especially, all right, you'll need to speak with your medical practitioner, all right? You'll need to make sure that it's right for you. You need to take those precautions, okay? That's something I've read numerous times. That's something I've seen in numerous studies. I'm not saying that as a medical practitioner, but I would always tell individuals, anyone that's starting a keto diet, I would always tell individuals to talk to their medical practitioner. But some precautions, all right, you might, just to be safe, all right, if you have high blood pressure, all right, or taking medication, or if you're taking medication for diabetes, we might need to see if you need to avoid keto or anything like that. Also, all right, anyone who's breastfeeding, all right, we'll just point that out as well. All right, so high blood pressure, diabetes, and if you're breastfeeding, those are the groups that I would really, really want you to speak with your medical practitioner about. But anyone that's starting keto, speak with your medical practitioner. All right, because you're taking out a whole macronutrient and you're supplementing it with a little bit higher protein, which can be tougher on the kidneys, on the liver, and then also with fats, same thing. You're very welcome, Mac. My pleasure. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Reduced carbs will reduce blood pressure. Fasting will reduce blood pressure too. All right. That's an interesting point too. The only thing I will say, all right, just don't try not to look at things in like black and white, because you could reduce carbs. Sometimes I always like to put it like this. Sometimes you just pull the genetic card. All right, I know with me, there's individuals who are super fit, they work out all the time, they watch what they eat, but they still have high blood pressure. It's genetic. They're genetically predisposed to it. Also, reducing carbs is fine, all right, might help you to reduce blood pressure, but what else are we eating? All right, what are the other foods that are in your diet? All right, just because we're reducing carbs, all right, if we're, lacking a certain nutrient, let's say we're low in magnesium or we're low in potassium, things that we know can help with blood pressure, all right, or if we're eating a lot of saturated fat and trans fats, all right, that can be detrimental to our blood pressure. Also, if we're obese. All right, so I know the point that you're making there, Toom, and I absolutely, appreciate that. But just make sure, be careful, all right? Reducing carbs has the ability to help reduce blood pressure. Will it? Not always, all right? We have to take everything into consideration. That's why I would always speak with your medical practitioner. All right, fasting will reduce blood pressure too. Again, fasting can help. There's research that's out there to show that fasting can help with blood pressure, but we have to take it as take everything into account. All right, not only just the fasting, but the foods we're eating. Are we sedentary, obese? What types of fats are we having? What types of proteins are we having? Even if we're fasting, if you're eating carbs, the types of carbohydrates and inflammation that's being created through the body. So I know exactly what you're saying there, Toom. Point well taken, but I just want to make sure for everyone else, just be careful, take everything into consideration, guys. All right, because keto is great, fasting is great, but we need to make sure that we take a couple precautions there, especially like I mentioned, individuals high blood pressure, all right, individuals diabetes, all right, and then people who are breastfeeding. Now, people with pre-diabetes, I'll just also point this out as well, people with pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, all right, metabolic syndrome, all right, that keto is very popular for those individuals as well, because there's been studies linked to being able to reverse prediabetes, all right, and help reduce the risk of developing diabetes. Again, why? It makes total sense, because you're not spiking blood sugar levels and you're keeping your blood sugar regulated, all right? There's no spikes, all right? You're keeping it low, because remember, we're taking out the carbs. Once you have carbs, glucose is created. So thanks for making those points, guys. Awesome. Thank you so much. If there's any more questions, please feel free to ask. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we know we stay, like I said, we're restricted, but restricted in carbs. You can eat the proteins you want. You can eat the whatever fats you want, pretty much. All right. I would stay away from, if we're going to go from, we'll go into foods that we'll stay away from in a little bit, because there's a couple that might be surprising to some people, all right, and what foods are good. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So we know what it is, all right. Obviously, it's a diet that's low in carbohydrates, where our body isn't going to be producing glucose and insulin, not getting that spike, and then where we're getting into ketosis. All right, and remember, ketosis is where our body stops using sugar or glucose, you can call it whatever you want, as energy and fuel and starts using fat as fuel. And then that's why it's so popular as a weight loss tool, because then we're starting to burn more fat. We're feeling more full. Things of that nature. It takes a couple of days to get there, but once we're there, that's when we really start to see the benefits of being in ketosis and of feeling more full, all right? But you need the plan, all right? We need to make sure that we have the plan, or else you're going to feel the first couple of days, those sugar cravings are going to be kicking in, guys, okay? So again, I think keto, that's the keto basics, all right? We want to make sure, all right, by drastically reducing carbs and replacing it with things like fat and even with protein, all right, because I wouldn't really want you to just do all fat. You're going to have some protein go up as well, because let's think about if you increase eggs. Well, you get about 6 grams of fat and about 5 grams of fat, 6 grams of protein from an egg, all right? So your protein's probably going to go up as well, all right? So when that happens, all right, when you start to reduce, all right, drastically, remember, not over 50 net carbs, probably even lower, replacing it with fat and a little bit with protein, all right, you get into ketosis. And remember, ketosis is a metabolic state, guys. All right, a lot of people just throw ketosis out like, oh, I think I'm in ketosis. All right, we got to remember, it's a metabolic state. We need time to get there. All right, so what happens when we get in the metabolic state called ketosis? Well, it's efficient at burning fat for energy, and that's what we want. All right, we don't want to use that glucose. We want to use the fat, burning fat for energy. Fat becomes our main energy sources, guys. There's glucose, all right, sugar, or there's our fat. Those are our types of energy, all right? So once we're in ketosis, all right, our body becomes incredibly efficient at burning fat for energy. Also, fat turns into ketones. Remember, I mentioned ketones a little bit earlier. We said that they were produced by the liver, in the liver, right? And then that they can supply the brain with energy. So that's why we feel more energized. People will say once they start on keto, they're feeling more energized throughout the day. All right, ketones, all right, are one of the reasons for that. Also, another reason why people will say that is because they have a never-ending supply of energy because they're constantly burning fat. So not only are you getting more energy through ketones being created in the liver, but you'll also have this never-ending source of energy because you're constantly burning fat, as opposed to if you sort of take that in combination with glucose, you're going to burn through the glucose. All right, once we burn through the glucose, we need more, and then that's where the sugar cravings come and why we feel hungrier. All right, sorry, I'm missing some comments here. Our med practitioners here at the diabetic clinics have not been seeing patients since COVID, just replacing physicians in private med. Yeah, absolutely, Kathleen. I've heard some pretty sad things. You know, in the U.S., you know, of course, being up here in Canada, we get all of the U.S. news. Sorry to hear that. It's been very tough through COVID, hasn't it? We actually just went into a lockdown, believe it or not, today, where I am in Canada. So yeah, we just went back into our lockdown. So yeah, very, very tough times. I am the mother founder of a home, Hill of Hope. Wow, man. I'm the mother founder of a home, Hill of Hope, of orphans, handicapped children, age 76 years old. Wow, Mac, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That's incredible. Age 76 years old. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Mac. Doing great things in the world to help individuals. There's nothing better than that. And congratulations. I'm sure you've helped a lot of individuals, a lot of children. Kathleen, med practitioners and dietitians not into other diets except the standard diet. Yes. And you know what? I think you can come at it from both ways. You know, sometimes what you'll find is people will only look at the standard diet. You know, you have your carbs, you have your fats, you have your protein. The other thing is some dietitians or doctors, med practitioners, will only look at it from one school of thought, like keto is the best, and then maybe mixing keto in with intermittent fasting. I'm kind of the mindset, I think that there's benefits really for all of them. Maybe some in a shorter term, maybe some longer term. Just depends on the type of person. Depends on, what a person is going through, what their own health, what their own health case is. Remember, each individual is different on a case-by-case basis when it comes to their health history. So some people will look at only the standard diet and only follow that and think the standard diet is all that's needed for health. And that might be true. I followed the standard diet for a long time. Others will look at only keto. All right. Others will look at only intermittent fasting. All right. That's why sometimes it's so hard to get nutrition advice or to get, nutrition ideas or information, is because it's coming from one school of thought. On the channel here, I like kind of bringing in a bunch of schools of thought and then sort of combining them together, and then individuals can sort of decide what works best for them. There's a lot of studies that show the benefits of keto, all right, and losing weight. I think that can't be understated. Raw garlic also helps reduce blood pressure. Absolutely. Eat 2 cloves every day. Well, yes, absolutely, Toom. Like we were saying in our last discussion, when it comes to heart health, I think raw garlic is one of the best things that you can have. Tons of heart health benefits, not just reducing blood pressure, but also, cholesterol, inflammation, reducing atherosclerosis, circulation, heart disease, stroke, bunch of different things. Sulfur compounds, allicin, and raw garlic, very, very powerful when it comes to heart health. And from the island Borneo, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yes, lots of kids, but get tired easily. What can I do? Well, sometimes, again, it sort of depends. Kids, again, getting tired easily, all right? Lots of kids, but get tired. So is it you getting tired easy, Mac, or is it the children? I would imagine if you're looking after a bunch of children, a bunch of orphans, you would be probably using a lot of energy. I would imagine that it might be you that might be the one that's be getting a little bit tired there. By the way, thank you so much for the thumbs up, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys are enjoying the chat so far. How long have we been talking? Geez, almost an hour. Incredible. Time flies by. So that's our main point here, guys. All right, getting into ketosis. Ketosis, again, a lot of the times people will even argue that ketosis is sort of the natural process our body goes into to help us survive when food is low. All right, and that can go back through history when we were hunters and gatherers. All right. Again, also remember during ketosis, it's very important because in this metabolic state, that's what ketosis is. All right, a metabolic state, we produce ketones in the liver. All right, again, produced in the liver, which can help to break down fats, all right? Or at least it's helped produced by the breakdown of fats in the liver, all right? So that's why you can get those ketones. Again, ketones, some people will supplement with like raspberry ketones and things like that. If you're doing keto right and you're on the right path for a ketogenic diet, your body's going to be producing ketones at a very good level, do the breakdown of fat in the liver, and then again supplying the brain with energy, supplying the body with energy as well. Right? A lot of people will be on keto, and then they'll supplement with ketones and things like that, thinking that will actually help keep them more full, all right? Or at least they'll give them more energy. Yes, it can help, but just being in the metabolic state of ketosis, all right, should be supplying you with the energy. Does that make sense? Because when you're in ketosis, the ketones are already being made, all right? Yes, we can supplement with them, but the whole point of being in ketosis, that metabolic state with ketones being created, you're now using fat as fuel. And the nice thing about fat is, one, you're not going to get the crash like you would from glucose, all right, which also comes with insulin production. All right, remember, insulin production is used to get glucose into the bloodstream so that it can be carried throughout the body. All right, but we're creating, right, through the process of ketosis, a nice energy source of fat, again, which people will always tell you does not run out because we have a never-ending supply of fat-burning energy. One, we're eating a bunch of fat during the day. It's a very high fat diet. And also we're burning body fat. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1, which is very nice. All right, so I think that's important. What it is, why we want to get on it. A lot of people, they'll tell me about being on keto, but not know the metabolic state of ketosis and why that's so important and how to get into ketosis. So I think to start correctly, guys, we need to make sure that we're just taking pretty much all of the carbohydrates. Like they said, that you can be in a range of net carbs from 20 to 50. I like 20 to 40. That the net carbs includes the fiber, where we take those out. We wait our 3 to 4 days, maybe even a little bit longer. All right. So we reduce our glucose levels and insulin levels, because that's what's going to be created through the carbs. We take those out. Now we're not creating glucose and insulin or producing them. All right. Especially as our prime energy source. Once we get low enough, all right, we take those carbs out, we're low enough in glucose and insulin, then we can start to get into ketosis. That's how we do it correctly. And then once we're in ketosis, all right, that's when we can start using fat as energy. That's when we can start producing ketones, all right? And that's where we can really start to see the benefits of weight loss and even fat loss, all right? We see a little bit of both of them. You guys can come on sort of with my journey, because like I said, I started keto, but I'm going to be doing it for 3 months. All right, mine's sort of just my own plan. All right, I'm not doing it really. It's for myself, basically. I'm enjoying it as of right now. It's giving me good benefits. It's something that I want to try. I haven't gone that long on keto, so I would just like to give it a try. And then if I'm feeling really ambitious, I'll probably do keto in a form of intermittent fasting. So where all I'm doing with that is, a lot of people will be like, well, how do you combine both of them? It's very simple. You eat a keto diet and then you just cut down your meal frequency. Eat 2 meals a day, and then that closes your window down. All right, so you can have meals at like 12 and at 6. If you're really up for it, some people will have it from 12 noon until 4 p.m. All right, so then your eating window is only 4 hours. You're fasting for 20. My goal is fasting for 18, but that's a whole different story. Again, that's going to be the easiest if you need it. And one of the services that's being provided on the channel now, all right, and we have some people signing up for them, all right, is nutrition consultation and nutrition coaching. The reason why, all right, starting these out, it can be very tough, and you need to make sure that you start out on the right path. All right, what are the right foods? Especially if you're thinking of combining them, my goodness, it can be super hard. I wouldn't suggest combining them right away, to be honest. I would do one, and then once you have success with one, go to the other. But I'm going to put my email in chat here, guys. Feel free to email me if you need any help, especially starting the new year. I know a lot of people are starting new diets. I know a lot of people are getting into keto. I see it with my own clients. I've been getting messages. Feel free to email me, and we can always set that up. More than happy to. I've helped hundreds of people with not only nutrition, training, the list goes on and on. Always happy to help, guys. And there are so many good recipes out there. 100%. I was talking with another client about there. She's not following keto or anything. We were just trying to reduce her calories. You know, if you find a couple of sources or even just a couple books, all right, usually what I'll give them is the foods. You take the foods, and then you can find recipes for those foods very, very simply. There's so many recipes. There's so many outlets, like you said, Tammy, like Instagram, TikTok even. Twitter, other things, Facebook, Pinterest, so many things out there where we can find good recipes out there. Okay, so I hope that helps. We know what ketosis is now. We know how to get into ketosis. We know what the process is of getting starting a ketogenic diet, being low carb and high fat. And we know it's restrictive, but restrictive in the sense of carbohydrates. We don't have to necessarily, especially at the beginning, be super restrictive of the fats and of the proteins. What I would like to point out, though, is once you really start getting into keto, you'll always hear people who are big keto fans and people who've been following it for a long time, and that's their I remember I told you about the schools of thought. That's their school, like keto is their school of thought. A lot of times individuals will want you to eat higher fat protein sources. So staying away from chicken. All right. If you're going to have chicken, have it with the skin on. That way you have the extra fat. All right. Having fatty fish, not lean cuts of fish. All right. So salmon and things like that. You're also getting nice omega 3s with the salmon. All right, but they want that not only because it has fat in it, all right, and protein, the two macronutrients that we have on keto, but also because it's not going to have as big of an insulin or blood glucose spike. All right, it's not going to increase insulin as much. Things like whey protein, all right, because it's digested so fast, is going to give you a little bit of a spike. All right, because of its digestion. So that's why they'll want you to stick with higher fat cuts of meat, which I think is very interesting and you don't hear all the time. Am I on Instagram? Not yet, Tammy. It's coming. Yes, absolutely. I will be on Instagram 100%, especially now that my face is out there. We did the face reveal. I think it's will be very soon that I'll be on Instagram, Tammy. And as soon as I am, I will definitely let you guys know. 100%. But sticking to things that are higher in fat, like you wouldn't have, like one example would be you wouldn't have maybe a tilapia fish, you would have salmon, all right, or sardines. They love those types of fatty fish, mackerel, things of that nature, even supplementing with like a fish oil, things like that. The other oils that, they don't always want you, all right, and we should maybe try to stay away from, all right, you would try to stay away from canola oil, like grapeseed oil, things like that, more processed. You would want to stick with like your avocado oil, coconut oil, and olive oil, the big one, olives. Olives is huge. Olive oil is huge on a keto diet. All right, and it's also nice because you are getting some anti-inflammatories, like we were talking about with TUM, and some antioxidants, all right, from those oils, especially avocado oil and olive oil. Now let's talk a little bit about what foods, all right? I think we know, all right, once we get into ketosis, very efficient at burning fat, all right? That's why I really like the diet. And again, you don't have to stay on it for long periods of time. You can go 3 to 6 months, all right? And then, get the weight loss benefits. Again, that's why it's nice to sometimes have a coach, because then you can come out of the diet. Because what happens is a lot of people will come out of the diet, add in a whole other macronutrient, carbohydrates being the next one, right? And then have yo-yo dieting. They'll increase weight, right? Because they're adding in carbohydrates now, right? They might be getting in sugars, right? While keeping the same diet very similar to the amount of fats and protein that they were having before, while adding in these carbohydrates. So you just have to be careful of when you come out of keto, right? If you do come out of keto, all right, make sure that you're not overdoing it on carbohydrates, because a lot of people will stop and then gain weight. We call that yo-yo dieting, because you're going up and down in weight. All right. Also, we already know, all right, and we've already talked about it, because by eating carbohydrates, you create glucose and insulin, main energy sources. But it's interesting because we see in many different studies, all right, ketogenic diets, all right, can cause a significant reduction in blood sugar and insulin levels. And that's probably your two biggest things, and two of the biggest things for weight loss. All right, going to have health benefits with that, of course, as well. All right, if we're talking about diabetes and things of that nature, again, speak with your medical practitioner. But you see a lot of people, metabolic syndrome can have good effects, health benefits. All right, so some health benefits related, obviously, to the significant reduction in blood sugar and insulin levels, but also along with increased ketones, health benefits from that as well. All right, so very nice to see. All right, lots of different studies on that, where we're getting a nice benefits from reduction in blood sugar, insulin levels, and increased ketones in the body. All right, we see that in a number of different studies. Now let's talk about different types of ketogenic diets, because I get this all the time as well. And we talked a little bit about the carb cycling. All right, is there just one keto diet, or is there different ways to eat keto? Well, there's multiple ways. I think some are better than others. All right, so what are some ways that we can follow a keto diet? Well, the standard, I guess what you would call the standard, would be something that's typically around 65 to 75% fat. All right, which is a lot of fat, and that's why I'm telling you guys, it might not be for everyone. All right, individuals with high blood pressure, diabetes, if you're breastfeeding, that's why it's always important to speak with your medical practitioner. All right, that's a lot of fat. So if you're eating 70% of your diet in fat, of course, that's a lot of fat. All right, so let's say you're having 70% fat. All right, 20% would be protein, all right, in and about, and then 10% as carbs. Okay, so 10% of your calories coming from carbs. All right, that's your standard. All right, if you're looking at it as someone who eats 2,000 calories, all right, if 10% of your carbs, if 10% of your calories is coming from carbs, that's 200 calories. The math is very easy because they want you having 50 grams of carbs. There's 4 calories per gram. That's 200 right there. There's your 10%. Now, the way I do it, I'm a little bit higher in protein. That's for my own needs. Again, that's why sometimes it's nice to have a coach. The needs of some people differ than from others, all right, or at least dependent on your goals, all right, what your goals are. All right, so mine is a little bit different. I do a little bit higher in protein, okay? So there's a high protein keto diet, all right? A little bit different, all right? A lot of the same sort of base as the standard keto, but for me, instead of being at 20% protein, I'm around 35% protein. 35, 40%, somewhere in between that. All right, so it's like 60% fat, 35% protein, and then like 5% carbs. All right, I might even drop fat a little bit, protein a little bit, add a little bit of carbs. But on my diet right now, my carbs are very low. It's because, and I make that as a choice because I want my protein higher. All right, I need to get in that protein, and again, that's just for me. So ketogenic diet. We also talked a little bit about, and again, if you're on a keto diet, guys, there's one out there that I've read about where you eat carbs in and around your workouts. All right, I think it's something called like targeted keto diet. All right, targeted ketogenic diet. That would be best for people who are, training for some sort of athletic sport where you're using carbohydrates as fuel, and it's long sustained workouts, it's high intensity workouts. That would really be the only time I could see people using it. It just does not make sense. If you're getting in, let's say, higher amounts, and if you're adding carbs, so if you're over that 10% around your diets, you're getting out of ketosis every day, or at least every day that you're working out. So it really doesn't make much sense. I don't know a lot of athletes, honestly, who are on a keto diet, I'll be honest. And I've worked with quite a few athletes. But for them, it's not always the best. If you think of Michael Phelps's 10,000 calorie diet and the amount of swimming that he was doing, it was like 8 hours a day. All right, or long distance runners, they're going to need some carbohydrates in their body for fuel. All right, the electrolyte imbalance would just be off too much. All right, with all the training that they do, that's what it comes down to. So targeted keto, guys, you might hear that at some point. All right, if you are, you probably want to stay away from it unless you're training for the Olympics or something like that, or doing triathlons or marathon runners, things of that nature. All right, because if you're doing targeted keto and you're eating carbohydrates every single time around your workout, once you go over that 50 net carbs, all right, and it could be even 40, in and around 50, all right, it doesn't have to be a hard and fast number, but somewhere in and around that 50, all right, I think 40, but let's say 50, all right, you're taking yourself out of ketosis. So what's the point of even going back into keto right after you're done training? Right? Especially if you're training 5 to 6 days a week. Remember, it takes 3 to 4 days to get into the metabolic state of ketosis, and you actually start getting the benefits of decreased blood sugar, decreased reduction in insulin levels, increased ketones. You're not going to be getting those benefits. You just lost all the nice benefits that we've seen from numerous studies on a keto diet. So that's why, again, targeted keto, definitely not my favorite. All right, and then the other one, all right, that you'll see is, and I think Tammy brought it up before, was like carb cycling. All right, so that would sort of allow you usually, all right, 2 days of high carb days. But again, we only have 7 days in a week. We know it takes 3 to 4 days to get into ketosis in and about. If you're having high carbs for 2 of those days, you're taking yourself out of ketosis, and you're never going to be in that metabolic state, right? Because you're never giving yourself time to deplete yourself of glucose, where you're actually not using that anymore, or sugar, glucose, sugar, all right, anymore for fuel, and you're still using that as fuel, and you're not using fat as fuel yet. All right, you're not giving yourself enough time to deplete those glucose sort of stores in the body. Mac, can I take garlic soak in vinegar? So garlic that's been soaked in vinegar, like an apple cider vinegar, garlic that's soaked in that sort of stuff. Mac, is that what you mean? Sorry. Tammy, I have to go. Thank you for coming on here so early in the morning to help us out. No problem, Tammy. My pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. Have an awesome Wednesday. And again, really appreciate you coming in, Tammy, as always. Thank you. So again, you know, and as Tammy's just about to leave, what she brought up, being in that cyclical ketogenic diet, again, not the best, guys. All right, one that I wouldn't recommend, just because you're taking yourself out of ketosis every time that you have those high carb days. And it's usually two high carb days. Even if it's just one, I mean, let's just say it's one. Even at one, all right, you're really only going to have a day or two where you're in ketosis. Okay, so it's better just to stick with that standard or with the more high protein ketogenic diet. Even with my high protein one that I'm following, my fats are still very, very high. All right, you want to keep that fat high. Okay. So those are the different types. Again, for different individuals, targeted carb cycling, not always the best. Again, you can practice. Here's the other point too, before we get into foods that are good for keto, foods you'll want to avoid. All right, here's the other important point I just want to make sure I say. If you're going to start a keto diet, because a lot of people will kind of do intermittent fasting with it, so they'll decrease their meal frequency while on keto. Make sure you're not putting too much on your plate at once, guys. All right, it can be a very demanding diet in the sense of, you know, it might not be the toughest for food choices and for making meals because your meal frequency is low. You're eating in and about the same foods every single day, but it can be tough on the body and on the mind, especially getting into that metabolic state of ketosis to start. All right, it can be draining to start. A lot of people will talk about keto flu. All right, and again, that's just the imbalance of electrolytes in the body. So sometimes you might be feeling fatigued and things like that. Again, start slow, start simple. I wouldn't count calories again once you're starting out. All right, you just want to make sure that you're getting into ketosis, have the higher fat, all right, have your protein. All right, I've seen too many people try to, you know, they'll watch a couple videos and then try to do this, and this. All right, and then it's always super hard. All right, it's super hard to maintain a ketogenic diet when you're intermittent fasting at the same time. All right, so only having like 2 large meals a day on keto. All right, again, if you're just starting with keto, you don't know how often you need to be eating. All right, what's going to keep you going? What's going to keep you feeling full? It especially can be said for intermittent fasting. Let's say you stop eating at 4. What's the meal going to have to look like at 4? That's going to keep you satiated all the way until noon the next day. All right, that's going to take a little bit of time. So I think you should just, not start out too fast. Take it slow. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. All right, so we know ketogenic diet's effective at weight loss. All right, tons of research out there. I don't think we need to go over this point too much. Toom brought up a little bit that I can help with blood pressure, obviously with blood lipids, so triglyceride levels and things like that. Just make sure it takes a combination of everything. So if you're doing a little bit of keto, all right, but we're obese or we're sedentary, we have to keep that in mind as well for blood pressure, or if we're having micronutrient deficiencies. You're very welcome, Mac. It's late there. Okay, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it, Mac. Thank you so much for your questions. And thank you so much, guys, for the thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. All right. The other nice thing that I will say before we get into foods and things like that is that through increased ketones being produced by the breakdown of fat in the liver and through lower blood sugar levels, because we're taking out carbohydrates, our body is now using fat as fuel, all right, and we're fueling our body with protein and fats, all right, we can see an improvement in insulin sensitivity, all right, which is very nice. So I think that's big as well, because that's a really big thing in society today also. Insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, also, big, tons of information coming out on that all the time. All right. Now, before we get into, again, what are some of the foods that we want to eat, let's also think about some of the things that we need to be mindful of, all right? When we're starting a keto diet, I think that's important to go over, especially if we want to start correctly. Some of the things that you might experience. Well, one, again, we talked a little bit about nutrient deficiency. Now, how come you might be going through nutrient deficiency? Well, because we're cutting out, again, that whole macronutrient that we were talking about, right? Carbohydrates. So we're taking out foods such as, certain types of vegetables, quite a bit of fruit, whole grains, right? So we're taking all those out that can be high, all right, like beans and legumes, things like that as well. Okay, so we're taking those out. Again, that could possibly lead to nutrient deficiency. This is why I say it's so important to make sure you have your meals planned. Make sure you're having vegetables. If you need to get on some, the right supplementation, micronutrient supplementation, you can do that as well, right? They'll, like I said before, they'll list things like selenium and vitamin C, B vitamins. If you're if you're worried about selenium, have one Brazil nut. If you're worried about B vitamins, you can have a little bit of beef and things like that, even other protein sources. C, have your cruciferous vegetables, guys. There's ways to get around that. Just be mindful. Nutrient deficiencies are something, that we would like to avoid if we are going to start keto. The other thing that we need to be mindful of, and this is why I said sometimes it's good to have a coach, and why sometimes the hardest part can be the first couple of days, is because you're going to go through a period where it's almost like a foggy period in the brain. All right. Some people are more irritable. All right. Some people deal with confusion and things like that. Just because we've gone from our brain using carbohydrates to function, now more so. Now we're in a low carb diet, so we're not using those sugars or carbohydrates to function. So it takes a little bit of time for the body to adapt. And again, that can take a few days, it can take a week, all right, and things like that. Again, this is why you want to make sure you speak with a doctor, all right, medical practitioner. Constipation is also a big one. Sometimes, people deal with constipation. This is why I say have your cruciferous vegetables, get as much fiber in that way. We talked about that a little bit earlier. All right, so instead of taking like your Metamucil to get fiber in, have your cruciferous vegetables like your broccoli, cauliflower, super high in fiber. And then a great mix with that is olive oil. All right. super, super healthy. Also, that's going to be great for digestion and relieve some of the constipation. One, because you're getting fiber, but also that good fiber is going to be helping with good bacteria in the gut. I'll also say if you're on a ketogenic diet, it's probably good for you to have fermented foods. Right now I'm having sauerkraut. So sauerkraut for fermented foods. I'm also supplementing with a probiotic. You want to make sure your gut health, all right, is good. Make sure that we're getting good nutrient absorption, especially so we're staying away from those nutrient deficiencies, things of that nature. Okay. So I think that's a good one. I think now we can get into our discussion of what types of foods, all right, we should have on a keto diet. What we should have and then what we should avoid, all right? So I think, the foods that we want to eat, there's a bunch of different foods. Now, so going back to the Parkinson's, all right, because I know there's been a lot of research. It's so hard to say exactly with Parkinson's, all right, because we know with epilepsy, right, there was some very good research that came out through a ketogenic diet having significant reductions in things like seizures. So that's an easy one to point out too. Same thing, it might help slow down the progression of Alzheimer's disease and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. I already mentioned the heart disease, all right, issues and things like that, how it can be beneficial for that. For Parkinson's, again, really haven't seen there. I think there needs to be more research done. I haven't seen a ton of research really pointing to the improvement of symptoms with Parkinson's disease. All right, so I just wanted to point that out real quick. Now, let's talk about foods that we can eat on a keto diet. And if anyone's on a keto diet right now, let me know, and then go ahead and ask your questions, guys. This is the time to ask. And there's no bad questions, especially when it comes to a keto diet, because there's so much information. Anything that has to do with nutrition, I always tell all my clients, there is no bad questions. There are so many schools of thought and so much literature out there and so many sources. We talked about Instagram, Pinterest, all of that different stuff. There are so many sources that it's really hard sometimes to pinpoint, what the correct answers are to some of our nutrition questions. So even if you Google it, one page will say this, another page will say that. So ask your questions, guys. Don't be afraid. All right, I'm more than happy to answer them. And thank you again for all the thumbs up, guys. I really appreciate it. And I know we had Sonia in here. Sonia, a great member of the channel. Sonia joining up as a Fit Team member. Appreciate you, Sonia. Thank you so much. Hit that join button, getting those nice perks. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sonia. So what foods can we eat on a keto diet? All right, this is the big one. Especially if we want to stay in ketosis. Remember, that's the metabolic state, guys, that we want to stay in if we want to get the benefits of being in a keto diet, of being in ketosis. Well, one of the big ones, all right, and one of the most important, I guess all of them are important, but one of the more popular ones is going to be meat, guys, red meat, things like that, okay? And remember, it tends to be more on the fattier side, all right? That way you're not increasing insulin levels, all right? So things like red meat, ground beef, very, very popular on a keto diet, and those are foods that we can eat, all right? So the majority of your meals are going to be built around these foods, all right? It can be steak, bacon's a big one, all right? Chicken, I said earlier, so like other sources of meat, you can have your red meat, so ground beef, different cuts of steak, ham sometimes is used, sausage I'll even see on there. If you're going to have chicken, again, a lot of the times it's preferred that you would keep the skin on, just so you have that extra fat in there. Because remember, the leaner the source of the protein, the little bit more of that insulin spike you're going to get. Okay, that's why we say with powders and things like that, whey protein powders, other protein powders, you're going to spike insulin just a little bit, just because it's digested so fast. That fat is going to slow down the digestion and then the absorption. The other thing, another huge one is going to be eggs. All right, and this is huge on my in my diet. All right, so both of those, to be honest. All right, but eggs, all right, if you can get omega-3 whole eggs, I think that's great. Pastured, all right, is awesome. All right, free range chickens, all right, looking at those types of eggs, especially if you're eating quite a few, all right, on a keto diet. Sometimes I'll eat 3 to 4 eggs in a day. So eggs are a huge one. All right, we can have eggs. Sometimes I'll even put egg whites in. All right, but whole eggs, all right, that way we're getting a little bit of omega-3s. All right, if we're talking about omega-3s, other foods that we'll want to build into our diet if we're following a ketogenic diet is fatty fish. Again, salmon is probably one of your more popular ones. We're getting good protein, good healthy fats. Rupal, how you doing? Good to see you, Rupal. Thanks so much for coming in, and good morning to you. Always good to see you, Rupal. Appreciate it. But salmon, another nice one would be mackerel and sardines. I think those are 3 very good ones. Fatty fish, guys. Think fatty fish, so like your salmon, mackerel, sardines, fish oil, all right, whatever it is, you're going to get nice fats, good protein from that, and omega-3s, I think is very nice. Another one that, and I think if you're going to have healthy oils, I think the 2 most popular, and maybe the best 2, would be extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil. Those are probably the 2 best. You can also add a little bit of, sometimes I'll have a little bit of MCT oil, so a little bit of coconut oil in there as well, right? But extra virgin olive oil is probably going to be on everyone's diet if you're following keto at some point. So a lot of olives, a lot of olive oil involved in a ketogenic diet. Another popular one is going to be butter, all right? Butter and cream. Again, you want that full heavy cream, full fat cream. Same with butter, same thing. Again, the more fat that's in it, the less you're going to increase insulin, all right, and glucose. So there's less spike you're going to get. We want to stay away from that completely. Again, just by having, some people will have skim milk. Don't forget there's milk sugars in skim milk. So we want to stay away from that. Make sure we're having either butter or heavy cream. Now, another good one is probably going to be nuts and seeds. Again, that's where a lot of people's fat is going to come from. Right, it's where a lot of mine is coming from right now in my diet. But nuts and seeds, healthy nuts and seeds, guys. See, this is showing that we don't have to just do, unhealthy fats, because we know there's going to be a lot of fat in a normal keto diet. It's like 70%, right? Even with the higher protein that I have, it's still 60% or a little bit over. But you don't have to be eating unhealthy fat. You can be getting good fat sources. We've talked a little bit about the omega-3, so fatty fish. We've talked about extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, like salmon, fish oil, things like that. Eggs, a nice healthy fat. All right, and then now we're talking about nuts and seeds. Ones that I really like, pecans, I think are very underrated when it comes to a keto diet. Lots of fiber in them. But then you can also have almonds and walnuts. Those pretty much make up the 3 what I have. And if you like seeds, I'm kind of staying away from seeds right now. But if I'm going to have seeds, pumpkin seeds would be a big one. Flax seeds and chia seeds. All right. And then that's going to probably, if you're having those or a mixture of those with any of those fats that we just mentioned, I don't think you're going to have any problem hitting your 70% fat intake. A lot of fat there. Just make sure, again, don't count calories at the beginning, guys, because it's going to be harder and harder for you to sustain. But you can get those healthy fat sources in there. All right, guys. So, and you're getting good, like I said, the protein is going to go up, especially if you're having the meat, the fatty fish, the eggs, nuts and seeds. Okay, that protein is going to go up there fairly nice. So notice how when we talked about the healthy oils, okay, I said canola oil. We might probably want to stay away from that. Grapeseed oil, those things. All right. So I would stick with, if we're going to stick with healthy oils, extra virgin olive oil or avocado oil. The other thing is, if you're going to, use, because canola oil is used in a number of different recipes. It's used for cooking. All right. It's like used for cooking spray. Now I'm just using butter. All right. 1 tablespoon of butter. One last thing I'll say, guys. All right. You're gonna want probably cheese is up there for a lot of people. So like a cheddar cheese is really easy. Blue cheese is really popular. Goat cheese is really popular on keto. But I'll also say make sure you're having some low-carb vegetables. Not even some. Make sure you're having quite a bit. Get your vegetables in, guys. All right? And that can be from a number of different sources. All right? I really like broccoli. I like spinach, kale, Swiss chard. All very, very nice. Cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all great sources of vegetables for a ketogenic diet. Now, a big thing that people will ask and always bring up, okay, so we know those are the foods that we want to kind of stick with, right? People will always ask me, can I eat fruit on a keto diet? Do I have to wipe fruit out altogether? The answer is, well, one, it depends how many carbs you've had for the day. If you're at that 50 net carbs, then yes, you can't have any fruit. But if you build it in, and that's why I'm saying the plan is the most important thing. If you build it into your plan, then yes, you can have some fruits. All right. And I say some fruits because we have to avoid others. Some of the most popular fruits, I think, all right, and ones that I'm having, all right, one would be blackberries, raspberries. Strawberries are sort of a very, very popular one. I think you can keep it at that. Blueberries, if you're keeping it very minimal. You guys know I love blueberries, all right? But again, we just need to stay a little bit lower in carbohydrates, all right? But just make sure you can have them in there. We just need to make sure that we're keeping them in moderation. So I'll have like a cup of raspberries. I want to have some fruit. I like the antioxidants, the flavonoid antioxidants that are in there, all the micronutrients that are in those sort of berries. So that's not something I want to give up. So I make sure that I build it into the diet. Again, in a cup, I think there's only something like 10 carbohydrates in raspberries, and 5 of those are going to be fiber. So it's very, very low in net carbohydrates. So it keeps me at that range very, very easily in that 50 range, right? And again, you're going to have to probably measure it out because as I've been learning, a cup of raspberries is not that much, guys. So make sure you measure it out. So those are the foods that you're going to want to stick to on a keto diet. Now, what are foods that we're going to want to avoid? All right. Well, of course, all right, we know that we want to get rid of carbohydrates in general, or at least keep them very, very low. All right. Remember, not over 50. So we need to keep carbohydrates low. So all sugar needs to be taken out. Anything with sugar, take out of the diet, guys, if you can. 0 sugar if possible. All right, so soda, of course, candies, baked goods, things like that. Fruit juice, which we've talked about in the past. Remember, I think it was something like over 60% of our sugar intake was coming from soda and fruit juice. All right, so we need to take out those sugary foods, no sugary foods while we're on a ketogenic diet. These need to be eliminated from the diet, not just reduced, but eliminated if we can, because these sugary foods are going to give you the biggest blood glucose spike, the biggest glucose spike. And we know that's the exact opposite of what we want. We will never get into a metabolic state of ketosis if we're having that blood glucose spike. All right, so, and then we'll never be burning fat as fuel. So we want to make sure we take out as much sugar as possible, eliminate it if we can, guys. Also, as Tammy was saying, all right, we want to make sure, grains, starches, things like that. So like your rice, your pasta, even your whole grains, guys. The reason why, it's not because they're unhealthy, it's just it's going to be too many carbohydrates for us, right? And if we're having too many carbohydrates, again, we can't get into the metabolic state of ketosis. So that includes, your oatmeal, one of my favorite foods, all right? I have to go without any oatmeal, all right, for the next little while, all right? Again, that's beans and legumes, two different types of foods that I'm a huge fan of, but we got to get that fiber and those micronutrients from somewhere else. All right, we can't have our black beans or lentils or things like that. Again, they're super healthy, but there's just too many carbohydrates in them. All right. So we want to try to avoid, or at the very least, reduce beans and legumes. Okay, if you're very low in carbohydrates already, all right, and you say you can get away with 25 grams of carbs from black beans because there is some fiber in there, it'd be a very small portion, all right, but you'd really want to reduce how much you're having, okay, because the carbohydrates will sneak up a little bit. A lot of people will ask, should you count the carbohydrates in your green vegetables? I would say no, not in the cruciferous vegetables. I would just try to get as much of that in as you can. Okay, so you can have beans and legumes. You'll just try to want to avoid large portions of it because we don't want to go over that 50 grams. All right, now, same thing with fruit. Some people will say remove all fruit. I think things like bananas, I think pineapples, what are some other fruits? Mango, things like that. I think those need to be avoided. All right, when it comes to fruits, guys, just try to avoid those as much as possible. The reason why, all right, bananas, grapes, mangoes, pineapples, kiwi even, pears, apples, sometimes we'll have to really limit those guys and really reduce those, all right, just because of their carbohydrate count, all right, and their sugar, all right. Don't forget fructose is found in those. Bananas is all going to be all carbohydrates. So if you have a large banana, one medium-sized banana, you're going to be getting close to 30 grams of carbs, all right? And it's a fast digesting. It's not a complex carbohydrate. So that could very well take you out of ketosis as well. Try to avoid and limit. Remember, if it's fruit, try to avoid and limit as much as you can, but you can have portions of those berries which we mentioned. All right. And again, you have to measure them. All right. Because it's smaller portions. So for me, it was a cup of raspberries. All right. You can also have blackberries. Strawberries are nice. Blueberries at the other end. All right. I would stick more so with your raspberries, blackberries, and strawberries. I think those are just fine. A couple lemons are okay. So if you like lemons, like with a little bit of lemon water, that's all right. Cantaloupe is actually okay as well in small amounts, guys. So just keep that in mind. Yes, a lot of fruit will have to be taken out, but in small amounts, depending on the type of fruit, you can have it in the diet. Now, the other thing too, all right, and something that was hard for me, because you guys know and you listen to the stream, you know that I really, really like sweet potatoes. All right, potatoes have to be taken out of the diet. They're just too high in carbohydrates. The starches found in potatoes are just a little bit too high. Unless you're having like a quarter of a sweet potato, you're going to put yourself over your sort of carbs allowance for the day. So really, we try to avoid as best we can potatoes, root vegetables, things like that. Now, again, of course, the other one that you're going to want to try to eliminate, not just reduce, is alcohol. All right, because alcohol is going to take you out of ketosis. All right, things like beer, wine, obviously, we're going to want to try to avoid those as much as we can. All right, alcohol, high in carbs. A lot of people don't realize it, all right, until they really start tracking their calories. But things like wine, super high in carbohydrates. Even those healthier, even what's kind of marketed as healthier beers, you're still going to have a lot of carbohydrates in them, okay? So stick with those. Be careful with alcohol when you're on a keto diet. Again, you're just doing yourself a disservice by having those in your diet. I would stick to those ones that we talked about before. Now, foods to avoid, processed vegetable oils you might want to always avoid, things like that. Condiments and sauces is going to be a big one as well. All right, so if you're a fan of like ketchup and things like that, barbecue sauce, I know if you're having more red meat, barbecue sauce can increase. Only thing is, it's going to come probably with high levels of sugar. So you'd have to get reduced or low calorie ketchup or barbecue sauce, things of that nature. But we need to make sure we're staying away from condiments, because 1 tablespoon of most ketchup varieties is going to be like 5 grams of sugar. So just be careful with your condiments, guys, okay? Ketchup, barbecue sauce, sugar can add up very, very quickly. Right? It's so funny because I have a lot of people, especially on keto, kind of excited with barbecuing and things like that and trying a bunch of different recipes, but you're a little bit restricted when it comes to the condiments and the sauces that you can actually use when you're eating like red meat and steak and all of that good stuff, turkey, chicken. So a little bit different. So those are the foods that you want to sort of avoid, guys. Okay? So I think, don't be afraid to have some, if you're not following intermittent fasting, all right, you can have some snacks, like snack throughout the day, all right? I had to get through a little bit of my first couple of days. So you can have like cheese, nuts and seeds. Another one is sometimes you'll even see dark chocolate. I think if you're going to have dark chocolate, it's got to be higher than 90% dark chocolate, right? Or else it's going to have too many carbohydrates. So I think that's nice. You can also, there's those fat bombs. If anyone who's done ketogenic before, you know what a fat bomb is. It's basically sort of, it's like, can be like cream cheese that has coconut in it a lot of the times. It's basically just fat. It's not going to increase insulin, blood glucose levels, and it's going to satiate you. All right. So have those snacks if you need them, all right, just to keep you satiated so that you're not turning to carbohydrates, guys. So I hope that discussion helped. I hope you guys were able to get a lot out of the discussion today. I know for a keto discussion, if you're not following the keto diet or you're not interested in a keto diet, it's very kind of specific and niche to a certain listening audience. So we know that, but I think it's important because I know a lot of people were in here. We had a bunch of people in earlier. All right. People will be listening to this later on. I think starting out correctly will be very, very important, especially coming into the new year here now. It can be very effective for weight loss. Again, you have my business email in there. If you need any help setting up diets, starting the new year off right, whether it be keto, whether it be intermittent fasting, I know those are two of the most popular questions that I get, whether it's a combination of both of those. All right. Don't hesitate to contact me. I'd be more than happy to help. I think we'll just leave it at make sure you're getting your fiber in, guys. Make sure you're getting your micronutrients in there. I think that's very important. And then try your best, to stick through the first couple of days of keto. We know what the metabolic state is. We know low carb. We know the foods that we should be eating, and we know the foods that we should be staying away from now, guys. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all the thumbs up, and thank you for all the support on the channel. All right, guys. Thank you very much. I will talk to you next live on Sunday, and we'll go over another interesting topic. Maybe something to do with diet, maybe not. I'm kind of interested in something where we can all sort of benefit from it, not just individuals with keto, but I think this is an important discussion as well. All right, Kathleen, have a great day. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in. Rupal, appreciate you. Toom, appreciate you. And Mac, Tammy, everyone else that was in here. Sorry I can't scroll up, but Kathleen, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it. And so again, I hope that helps with anyone who's thinking about starting a keto diet. Just make sure you stick to it. And then, over the course of those couple of days into weeks, then we can start getting into ketosis and start burning that fat for energy. All right, guys, I will talk to you live next on Sunday.